Welcome to Black-led Day at the Up and Coming Food Co-op Conference 2021. Many of you have become familiar with the National Black Food and Justice Alliance through our work of organizing Black food co-op operators at the Up and Coming Food Co-op Conference over the past 3 years. But that work is really an outgrowth of some larger work the National Black Food and Justice Alliance has been doing. And that work started actually in Jackson, Mississippi. So we're going to talk about the history of that work and also talk about where that work is now. We're very pleased to be leading Black Food Co-op Day at the Up and Coming Food Co-op Conference and to be in partnership with the Food Co-op Alliance. In fact, this is just one part of the partnership with the Food Co-op Alliance. We also, the Food Co-op Initiative. We also jointly sponsor bi-monthly peer calls and quarterly webinars for Black co-op operators. And then the shaping of space for Black food co-op operators within the Up and Coming Food Co-op Conference is another part of this partnership. Today, we want to place the work of organizing Black food co-op operators within the larger context of building Black food sovereignty that the National Black Food and Justice Alliance is engaged in. And we are so pleased to have as my co-presenter today, the executive director and co-founder of the National Black Food and Justice Alliance, the mighty Dara Cooper. What up, though?
What up, though? You too kind. You too kind. I'm excited for this convo.
So I'm always happy to be in conversation with you. So many of the folks who have attended the Up and Coming conference over the last few years are familiar with me. They might not be familiar with you. So why don't we start with, who is Dara Cooper?
Well, I'll start by saying I am the daughter of a long lineage of troublemakers, good troublemakers, freedom fighters. The daughter of Ifalolo Mobola, of Ernestine Perry, Ibara Tarun, a long lineage of folks who, believe that our people have the right, the means, the wherewithal, the magic to create the destinies that our communities deserve. And so I personally have come up in a long lineage of freedom fighters, from the anti-apartheid movement to the movement in solidarity with Haiti, to political prisoners and exiles. So my roots are deep in the Black liberation struggle and the larger international struggle towards freedom, liberation, and dignity for our communities. And so I'm really excited and honored to be able to do the work that I do in service, in comradeship with an amazing alliance of leaders and organizations working towards food sovereignty and land justice. A couple of notes, just so folks know a little bit more about myself professionally or organizationally. I used to run a mobile market in Chicago called Fresh Moves. It's now, I would say, the longest running mobile market in the country. It's now run by Urban Growers Collective in Chicago. But Fresh Moves was where I would say, cut my teeth in the food justice movement. Also cut my teeth in the food justice movement with the Healthy Food Hub in Chicago, sponsored by the Black Oak Center for Sustainable Renewable Living. And then after that, I had the great privilege of working with comrades in Brooklyn, New York, with the Food and Fitness Partnership, launching a farm to preschool work, and a Black farmers market there, and a healthy corner store and a healthy supermarket. And so just done a lot of work, mostly around the distribution of healthy food to our communities, and control of food in our communities, which leads me to this incredible, exciting work that's happening amongst co-ops in this space. So an honor to be here. Did I leave anything out, Baba?
Well, there's lots more. We'll conversation. But over the last 2 decades, there's been a tremendous rise in what some people call the food movement in the United States. There's been an increasing awareness about the role that food plays in creating a just society, and also an increasing awareness of the damage that the current industrial food system is doing to the environment. So in the context of this rise of the food movement, why is there a need for a national Black Food and Justice Alliance, and how did that come about?
Mm. Well, I'm going to actually invite you to answer that question with me. So let's be in conversation together about answering that question. But I'll say many things. One is, to be candid, there's a need for Black people to be organized 100%. We can and should engage in the larger global struggle for food sovereignty, for land justice. And inside of that, it's really important that we understand the context, the conditions that particularly face Black communities specifically. I will say that the industrial ag system, as we know, actually has very deep roots in being very specifically anti-Black. There's all kinds of policies and legislation that specifically targets Black communities. And we would be remiss if we were to approach those policies and the system with this colorblind approach. And so we have to be specific because the system has been specific in targeting us. And we have to be specific in our response and also in our imaginations for what's possible for us. It doesn't mean we're narrow and we only care about Black people, right? It's Black Lives Matters, right? And that doesn't negate all, other people and communities. And we have always been and will continue to be intentional about understanding our communities, the plight of our communities inside of the global struggle for dignity, for self-determination, and for the rights of our people worldwide. And so it's critical that we have a space where we understand what is happening to us and also are inside of collective conversations and strategies together to address what our communities specifically need and deserve. What would you say, Baba?
Yeah, I would add to that one of the things that I think led to the forming of the National Black Food and Justice Alliance was our analysis that we specifically need to be building power for Black people.
That's right.
That even within the context of food justice organizations that are white-led, that still we have this problem of the vast majority of people who are identified as white in American society having not really examined how they fit into the system of white supremacy, how they unintentionally perpetuate it, how they show up with what I call white arrogance, white privilege, and white fragility. And so our work is really, to figure out primarily how do we extract our communities from this extractive economy that we find ourselves in and this disempowered situation that we find ourselves in, and to promote self-determination. So our primary work is not really to figure out how do we reform white people and how do we, get inside of white organizations and help white organizations to see the world in a more just way. Our work primarily is to organize Black people to build the power that we need to exhibit self-determination. So right. I think that analysis distinguishes the National Black Food and Justice Alliance from many people who might be Black who are doing work that is food justice related work, but aren't explicitly building power for Black people.
Yeah, let me riff on that too. So yes, to everything you said. And there's something I meant to say earlier too about how white supremacy shows up in the food movement and amongst our organizations. And what white supremacy teaches is that whiteness is the top, is the lead, is the that white people get the unearned privilege of being able to lead and have a say in the direction, and at the top, I heard a number on a call I was on the other day that says 8% of nonprofits are headed by POCs, people of color. So only 8%. So that leaves us to what, 92%, I'm going to deduce that nonprofits. Now I need to check that number, but judging from my own experience in the food movement and different nonprofit spaces, when we see a saturation of white leadership, it's an unearned privilege that white people have assumed in space to be the lead, to be the director, to be the spokesperson, to be the decider. And it is way past time to shift that. We need to assume our rightful place. Those of us who are deeply impacted by this food system, who are deeply impacted by injustice, and those of us also who have deep imaginations and brilliance and insight. It is our time to lead this movement. And so the National Black Food and Justice Alliance was founded in collaboration with other movements too. Heal Food Alliance. We've been in, relationship with many other formations to make sure that, our folks assume our rightful place as leaders in this movement. And in order to do so, we need the space, we need the time, and the energy together to be organized. And that includes making sure that we have a space to do so.
Yes, so absolutely, I agree with you. It's 100%. And in addition to this centering of white people as the assumed leaders of every damn thing, the logic of capitalism then begins to concentrate resources in the hands of those same.
That's right.
And so it becomes a self-replicating system because the people who, because of this unearned privilege, are in leadership positions and are more visible, are thus better positioned to get more funding. And not just because they're white, but also because they tend to be in the same social circles often with funders. Maybe they went to the same college, maybe they go to the same social events. They speak the same way, they kind of move through the world in a very similar fashion. And so money tends to be concentrated in the hands of those leaders. And so what we find is that then when it comes time to, let's say, apply for grants, that those who are considered to be more well-positioned or have the capacity, which is the word often used in the nonprofit fuck shit industrial complex, they have greater capacity, and so thus they get greater funding. And so it becomes a self-replicating kind of closed loop system almost. And so absolutely for us, we need to step out of that and assert our right to self-determination. And the National Black Food and Justice Alliance is certainly a vehicle for doing that.
That's right.
So let's talk a bit about the history. When did the Alliance start?
Yeah, so we started, the Alliance formally started in 2015, but and also I'm going to invite you to add on to the founding history of the Alliance as a co-founder yourself. But it grew out of a lot of initiatives and conversations and energy in a lot of different spaces. I'll say from my vantage point, it was the Bugs conference spaces, Black farmers, urban gardeners, where we would convene folks all around the country. And always on Sunday, we would strategize together in Black space at the Bugs conference to say, Black farmers, Black organizers, we need an agenda, we need a place, a container, not a container, but some infrastructure to be able to actualize our collective freedom dreams. And so about 2015, I'm not sure when that call, I actually want to lift up that call that I think, that Beatrice Beckford hosted amongst food leaders around the country to talk about what does, this was actually during the Ferguson uprising. So I would say 2015. And we were asking ourselves, with the rise of attention in police violence, people talk about the rise in police violence, and that's not true. It's the rise of attention around. Say that again.
I say the rise of people with camera phones to capture it.
Right, 100%. We've always had Cop Watch. Shout out to Malcolm X grassroots movement and other formations who, have been sounding the alarm around police violence. And so called together leaders to say, what does the food movement mean in this time? And so I remember that conversation and it stuck with me. And I will share, I was in a BOLD, which is Black Organizing for Leadership and Dignity training program, and Beatrice Beckford was in the same program. And we had an activity where we were asking, what's our, I forgot what it's called off the top of my head, but it's basically your commitment. What are you committed to? And mine was, I'm a commitment to building eco-affirming, healthy Black self-determination. And I asked her if she was interested in building out something. And she was enthusiastic about it. And we approached the one and only Malik Yakini to see, what we could launch together. And so that's how I entered this. And I can go into how we formally launched at at Penn Center in St. Helena in 2016. But what's your entry point into this?
Well, I'll say that even so, again, yes, affirming everything you said. And, the Bugs Conference had been this gathering place. And while we gathered there each year, many people were interested in how do we have sustained collective action in between the conferences.
Mhm.
And so there had actually been a couple of kind of conversations and false starts to try to create some national container for radical Black food justice work. And I'll just, without going into detail, just say none of those really materialized, but the National Black Food and Justice Alliance did. And so,
I will shout out one of those though, that the one that worked, this Black food sovereignty, I think it was Alliance, I can't remember the name of it, but they were really supportive in helping us too, to make sure we had the listservs and the people who were interested to kind of carry some of that into the at least institutional memory of the Alliance. So I look at the Alliance as a continuation of various
yes,
iterations of trying to bring Black people together around the food movement. And so, yeah.
and even within, I think, the larger Black liberation movement, this idea of being more self-reliant in terms of food has been an ongoing thread. There's been many
100%.
organizations that have had either agricultural projects or what we might now call food justice projects.
Mhm.
They framed within the larger context of the Black liberation movement.
Mhm.
So let's talk more about the National Black Food and Justice Alliance, where it is now, what programs it offers, and how this work of organizing Black food cooperatives fits within that larger context.
Okay, beautiful. Well, let me share my screen. Can I do that? Can
Let's-
I share a little presentation and walk y'all through some things?
I wish you could DJ today. People don't know that you.
I got an alter ego.
Yeah, maybe they'll get to see that some other time.
This next time, y'all got to invite me as a DJ next time. So, all right, can you see my screen?
Yeah.
All right, excellent. All right, so the National Black Food and Justice Alliance. Check out our new logo. Shout out to our new comms lead, Leanne Morissette, for leading that. But I want to start with just something about the Alliance that is near and dear to me, which is the fact that we are intergenerational brilliance. And so I think when we first started, our youngest was 18 and oldest was in 70s. So from 18 to 70s, we've always tried to hold the intergenerational brilliance of our people. And that's an incredible value of ours. And so we launched, this is a picture here of Randolph Carr and Savvy Horn, where we launched in St. Helena at Penn Center in 2016. And you can see all the stickies in the background, because we've been doing a lot of work over the years, mapping what's going on amongst Black people, seeing what our freedom dreams are, building out and weaving together what that looks like. And so over the years, we've built a leadership team, we've built committees that have now materialized into some concrete program that we're working on together. This picture here is, we convene our members every year, and last year, and mostly every year we can. We always convene on Black land. And last year it was at Franklinton Center in North Carolina. So when we convene, we typically have evening hours of shenanigans and fun things and spiritual things, like sharing stories over a fire and freedom dreaming together. And so I'm gonna go through just quickly some of our program areas of focus today. Because we have a lot going on and it's exciting. We have been listening to, working with, strategizing together. Y'all, I have thousands of reams of butcher paper from, okay, that sounds not terribly earth friendly, but there are a lot of ideas that have been surfaced that we have formed into some consolidated work together. And so the self-determining food economies is one work area. And land justice is another work area. So those are our two primary work areas of focus. It's around building self-determining food economies, which Baba Malik, I'm gonna actually ask you in a second to tell us what that means. And then the land justice, because we cannot do this work without land justice. It has materialized into what we know as Black Land and Power. We're also leading policy work together. We've launched a mutual aid resource council where we're making sure that members are driving resources back to our members. We launched a Black academics arm of the Alliance. These are Black people in the academy, mostly working on food studies, food justice studies. I'll talk about a little bit about that in a second, and then arts and culture that we've launched. So Baba Malik, can you tell us what we mean by self-determining food economies and why? What is this?
So because of the history of segregation, discrimination, and unequal disbursement of power in American society, Black people generally find ourselves in kind of in centers of population density. We tend to live in communities with each other, not always, but the most dense Black populations are in places like Brooklyn and Detroit and Chicago and LA and Atlanta, where we have these large Black communities. And what we find in these communities is that the food is being supplied by others other than Black folks, and the folks who are making mega millions off of that food are other than Black folks. And so we find ourselves in the midst of an extractive capitalist economy, which is extracting the wealth from our communities that we spend on food. And consequently, that wealth is not being circulated within our communities to create ownership, to create employment, to create healthy, vibrant communities, and to create empowerment. And so our effort to build self-determining food economies kind of focuses in two main areas. One has been on the retail level, building food co-ops. And while we think that Black businesses in general can be an important strategy in strengthening Black economies, we think that the cooperative model is really the best model that we can adopt because it provides for broad ownership as opposed to individual Black people who might own businesses and might do well. And maybe if they're somewhat conscious, might find ways that the larger Black community benefits, or maybe not. Because someone owns a Black business doesn't necessarily mean the Black community as a whole benefits from that. So the cooperative model provides for broad ownership and broad collective advancement. And so we're totally committed to that. So that's one aspect of the self-determining food economies work, to begin to capture some of that retail dollar and to build the infrastructure within our communities so that we can control the retail food economy. But then there's another side to it. And that's the side dealing with farmers and developing supply chains. And I've kind of reduced this, and sometimes my mind is not real complex. So this idea might be more complex than that, but I've reduced it to trying to figure out, how do we get Black grown food to Black plates? How do we figure out how to get things that are grown by Black farmers, move them through all the processes that are necessary for them to finally end up on the plates of Black consumers? How do we do for ourselves? I think is really the main thing that we're trying to figure out in the self-determining food economies work.
Beautiful. Thank you for that. And I realize I forgot a bullet point, so apologies and thank you for filling that in. I connect the supply chain to the food co-op movement work that you all have been leading, that we've been leading. And just to note, a lot of this came about because some of our members were starting a food co-op or had already started a food co-op, and we thought it was important for folks to have the space to share and grow and learn and build together. And so really excited to see and continue to see where it's growing out to be.
Who's that handsome guy in that photo, Dara?
That is Baba Fred Carter from Black Oak Center for Sustainable Renewable Living. And I chose this photo because the first time that I thought about self-determining food economies actually came out of a conversation where Mama Santua Harris Baba Fred, Mama Jafunza, we were all at your house in Detroit, and we were talking about a regional a local food economy that was resilient. And that was when, in my mind, it was kind of crystallized what we were talking about as the self-determining food economy. The other thing I'll say is shout out to Dr. Jazz, who has been leading our
full name for those who might not know.
Dr. Jazz Ratliff, recent PhD graduate of Tuskegee. And
she's amazing, I can tell you that.
She's brilliant and a go-getter, and we are so lucky to have her as a part of the team now for the National Black Food and Justice Alliance. And so she's been leading all of this work now with us, but also has been specifically leading our mapping work, which I highly encourage people to go to our website, blackfoodjustice.org, and check out the food map directory. I'm not going to dare to click on this link because I don't trust my tech skills, so I'm going to keep it moving so we can move through this. I mentioned some of the things. This is Tanya Fields from the Black Feminist Project in New York at one of our recent convenings too. And these pictures come from Carlton Turner, Sip Culture. So shout out to Carlton, who's so deeply committed to capturing and storytelling with arts and culture. But we are engaged in policy work together. We think it's really important that we drive our own policy agenda. Now, we seek very radical change, but we will use all the tools necessary to do what we need to do for our communities, including working around policy. And we think it's important that we set our own policy agenda. We get approached to sign on to many things, and we do if we feel like it makes sense. But it's really important that we lead that. And so some of the things that we're engaged in that you'll see coming up is the Red, Black, and Green New Deal with the Movement for Black Lives. You all saw the introduction of the Justice for Black Farmers Act, and then ongoing convenings around what a collective member-led agenda, policy agenda looks like, which we believe should always include something relating back to reparations. And so definitely stay tuned for that. You see here Dr. Monica White, author of Freedom Farmers, who is actually the founding member of Black Academics, the research arm of the National Black Food and Justice Alliance. We've been working on building archives, making sure that, just the knowledge like Carter G. Woodson papers and just all the things that people have access to in universities are available to our people who are committed to growing food and passing on knowledge. And so they're building out an archives, and we're partnering with various HBCUs and 1890 institutions. So we're really excited about that work. I'm going to skip ahead just to the land really quickly, which is our Black Land and Power work, which is really important to know about. Well, let me back up too, because we do have to shout out Fannie Lou Hamer, who says, in order for any people or nation to survive, land is necessary. And it should be known that we are rooted in Black self-determination and sovereignty, and we are committed to building relationships with Indigenous communities too, because we believe in their right to sovereignty and self-determination as well. And we are not inside of privatizing land nor competing for land. And we believe that there can be justice for all of our communities and has to be. So our agenda is rooted in building, fighting, and launching a fund. And so we are building a network of community land stewards. We are fighting, launching an organizing campaign, starting with 3 cities, Baltimore, Chicago area, and Jackson, Mississippi, to launch some organizing campaigns around community land. And we've launched a fund that is and will be governed by what we're creating called the Resource Commons Council. And that's important to know. You'll hear me talk about governance a lot because we can't talk about self-determination if we're not in the practice of governance and learning and sharpening our ability to govern ourselves. And so that is the land work. And then just briefly there is a lot of work being done in our comms and culture arm, basically under the leadership of Leanne Morissette and Randolph Carr, just helping to support our members with opportunities for funding, training, media support, amplification. There are all kinds of workshops that we'll be leading around and working also with the Movement for Black Lives around media trainings for people who need that storytelling support. We get approached by a lot of media, and we try to share that with members. So if folks are interested in sharing the microphone, by all means. Leanne will be developing some trainings and a digital toolkit for folks. Also working on a wellness initiative for our people, because we have to be well in this work and take care of each other and ourselves.
You have to. Who that in that picture we just passed? Not that one, not that one. Yeah, who that?
This is Ella Baker. You want to say something about Ella Baker?
Oh, you want to? I just see you got on your presentation. Who was that?
Well, this is actually Leanne's presentation, but I do think it's important always to lift up Ella Baker. Ella Baker actually was deeply involved in cooperative work and is my model for how she worked to organize with young people, understanding their brilliance, their insight, and their ability to actually lead. And so I definitely take my cues and have learned a lot around Ella Baker over the years. Is there something you wanted to say about Ella Baker?
Well, just in many ways, the mother of the modern civil rights movement, really an unsung hero, just has not gotten the recognition that she deserves, and trained many of the organizers who went on to start SNCC and other organizations. That's right. And also, you got lots of pictures of Fannie Lou Hamer. Why?
You derailing me from my presentation, but Fannie Lou Hamer also, who's one of our earliest models, and she rose around community land stewardship from Freedom Farm, cooperative built in Mississippi, spokesperson, I think, or head of the Mississippi, what is it? The
Democratic Party.
Thank you, Mississippi Democratic Party. And yeah, for so many reasons, but she's
Freedom Democratic Party.
Thank you. But she's absolutely important in our lineage. We do all these things that we do because of the shoulders that we stand on, which 100% is folks like Fannie Lou Hamer and Ella Baker. Also, just to point out, we typically hear a lot about men in the civil rights movement and in the radical Black tradition, but we don't get to hear about the women who organized and who have done so much. And so in the Alliance, we try to make sure that we're lifting that up, because it's an incomplete story, incomplete history, and we do ourselves injustice if we don't lift up the women, the leadership of women, also including queer and trans and gender nonconforming comrades in the movement as well. And so we are very intentional about that in all of our efforts. Anything else you want to say here before I go on? I want to show a little quick clip from Leanne.
Not yet. I'll interrupt you later.
Okay. But Leanne Morissette is a brilliant documentary, and I wanted to filmmaker, and she did a documentary, or some shorts for SAFON, one of our founding member organizations, Southeastern African American Farmers Organic Network. So I just want to leave y'all with just a couple of seconds from her film to really encourage people to go check it out, because it's also what's possible and what we're building inside of the Alliance is how we tell our own stories. So back to some really basic ways of living, because I think we have ran out of ideas on how to improve our life, and we need to just go back to the basics.
I always tell people I've worked in nonprofit, I've worked in corporate, I've worked retail. This is by far the hardest thing I've ever done and the most rewarding and fulfilling thing. We've come so detached from a part of us, like a part of us as Black people. We've always been growers. We've always been, and I'm not ashamed of that. So why not hone in on a skill that has been generational for us?
I grew up understanding that the land feeds you and it takes care of you. And so that's what I was brought up within. And that has been always the historical context of this farm, is to take care of the families.
How do you grow within your yard? Or how do you produce food and fruit and herbs and fiber and all of those things? Because those are the things that we need to sustain ourselves.
Thank you for indulging me here. I think this is, I wanted to include this because as a part of the co-op space, it's really important that, you know, we see Black leadership in terms of the co-op retail space, but also where our food comes from. The sourcing of our food in these co-op spaces is critical. And so it's important that we provide a pathway to make sure that we are purchasing from, supporting, investing in Black farmers and land stewards. And so I wanted to end with that there. Okay, that's it for me. I mean, here's our contact info, but.
Let's pause there and let people write these down if they want to. And the main thing is get the web address. If you don't write anything else down, get that www.blackfoodjustice.org down, and you can contact us and find out about the mighty work of the mighty National Black Food and Justice Alliance, led by the mighty Executive Director, Dara Cooper. Thank you, Dara, for that overview. Appreciate it greatly. So I've got a few questions for you. One, sometimes, you know, food co-ops are perceived as being a white thing. And I think in many of our communities, at least I'll speak from my own experience, I saw the emergence of food co-ops come in the kind of 1970s as part of the primarily white counterculture movement. And so sometimes food co-ops are still perceived as being these kind of white elite spaces where Black people are not welcome, and that's kind of not our thing. I wonder, what are your reflections on that?
Yeah, this is why I'm so excited about and deeply interested in this space you all are creating here. I think about Dr. Jessica Gordon-Emhart's incredible work called Collective Courage, the History of African-American Cooperatives. I think about what I just mentioned, or who I just mentioned, Fannie Lou Hamer and the cooperative work, and Ella Baker, W.B. Du Bois. I think about the long history, the Federation of Southern Cooperatives, you know, the long history that our communities can draw on, that we have always been in cooperative spaces. Dr. Nemhart argues that, you know, Black people have always been left out of we've never benefited from the capitalist economy. In fact, as my comrade said the other day, you know, we were the capital. And so shout out to Heber Brown. And so, you know, we have to have a critical understanding of capitalism and understand the history of the many explorations, experiments, bodies of work that our communities have always been inside of. And, you know, to white colleagues, you know, it's your responsibility to lift that up too. And so this whiteness, this co-optation of co-ops, and then, you know, I'm gonna say in food movement overall too, you know, we have this ongoing debate about whether or not kale is Black food, or avocado toast and all this stuff. Anyway, that's a tangent. I'm saying reclaim it because I grew up in it. I also read something from Dr. Harris that said that Black people have always grown kale in our gardens. And so anyway, all of that to say, I think it's our responsibility to reclaim spaces that we've always been in. In fact, in some cases have created. So like the community land trust work in this country, quite frankly, formalized out of SNCC in Albany, Georgia. So shout out to the charades who are still holding it down. But New Communities is one of the first examples we know of community land trust. Now you go to a community land trust conference, you'll see all white faces. And people forget that the roots actually were in Black communities, in Geechee communities. You know, we have all kinds of examples of Black people building cooperatives around our food, around our land, around our needs. So it's important to continue that space.
You know, I want to lift up that the great anti-lynching crusader, Ida Wells, actually wrote her first article, her first anti-lynching article, as a result of the lynching of the 3 operators of the People's Grocery, a cooperative in Memphis. So just, you know, to kind of tie in this cooperative work to the larger anti-racist work and the larger work of building Black self-determination, this has been a tool historically that we have used even prior to enslavement ending. Many would argue we had these mutual aid societies, if you will, or various ways of cooperating that weren't formally cooperatives, but they really cooperatives are our way. It's baked into our culture. It's baked into the way that we move through the world, both prior to our enslavement, during our enslavement to the extent we were able to, and immediately afterwards. So co-ops are definitely not a white thing. It's really part of Black culture.
That's right.
What types of organizations are members of the National Black Food and Justice Alliance? Not, you know, not naming all of them, but, you know, are they farmers? Are they policy people? Who joins the alliance?
Yeah, I'll share that, and then I want to kick the last question to you since we're at time. I'm going to tell you my question so you can think about it for a second as I answer your question. My question to you is, you have been so committed to institution building in so many different capacities, but you have been a incredibly strong anchor in this food movement. And so I'm super curious to you, why, what has kept you in this work for so long? And what have been your wildest freedom dreams around this? What is possible if we come together and realize our greatest potential? And so that's my question to you.
I'll be thinking about that while I listen.
All right. So the members of the Alliance range from, yes, farmer groups, land stewards, to co-ops, distribution, folks working in distributions. So folks working all along the food system. We also have capacity partners, folks who help to train organizers, because organizing is really important. Building out, again, we started building out what's called cultivator members, which are largely, first to start with, our Black academics arm. So these folks aren't necessarily in organizations, but we believe everybody should have a political home, and including academics. And so the Alliance has become a political home to many researchers as well. So from, again, farmer organizations to land stewards to local gardens, local growers, you know, we do ask to be considered as an organization that you are serving a community, that you are comprised of multiple decision makers, that it is not just one individual. And so, so we have a range, but our condition is that you are committed to our values, our shared values, which is, and then that you are at least 70% Black led. So.
All right, thank you. And for people who want to join, again, they can go to our website, which is www.blackfoodjustice.org. So you asked me this like complex, multi-layered question.
I did.
Make an attempt to respond to that and say that, first of all, I am inspired continually by our ancestors, both those who we share collectively, and you know, we know many of those names that are in textbooks and many names that are not in textbooks, but that we may be poor during libations and community ceremonies. But there's all these other folks that aren't in the textbooks and whose names aren't widely known, and including in our personal bloodlines. So there are people in my personal bloodline that I am tremendously inspired by, who built against all odds. And so when I look at the tremendous things they were able to do without the use of the technology that we now have access to, and without kind of all of the things that give us access to knowledge, all kinds of knowledge that they couldn't have possibly known in the past. I'm tremendously inspired about the possibilities of what we can do. Also, I have either the fortune or misfortune, depending on how you look at it, as being what some people call a true believer. That I just really believe that Black people will be free and that we can be free and that it's our responsibility to be free and that capitulation is not an option. And so we really have no choice but to build for our own sovereignty and self-determination. And so just that belief, which maybe is summarized in the words by Dr. King when he said the arc of the universe bends towards justice. I truly believe that. Or, in ancient Kemetic philosophy, they talked about the principles of ma'at or balance. I think that there is balance in the universe and that, that which is right ultimately overpowers that which is wrong. And so because I firmly believe that, I just can't see anything but victory for Black people and cooperative, non-capitalist economy operating in our communities in the future. I think it's important that we have dreams and visions that go beyond the current capitalist and white supremacist society and see us as being sovereigns, where we're actually governing ourselves and that we have an economy that benefits our communities while not working in opposition to the rest of humanity or destroying the environment. So, Dara, I want to thank you so much. It's always great to be in conversation with you.
I want to thank you.
We want to thank Dr. Jazz, who is behind that logo that you see behind the National Black Food and Justice Alliance logo, who has been handling the technical portion of this recording and also has been doing much of the organizing for Black-led Day. We're so appreciative of her, and also Sister Soraya, who's on the staff of the Alliance, who's also been doing much of that behind the scenes work. We also want to thank those of you who joined us and encourage you to stay tuned for the rest of Black-led Day. We have more tremendously powerful and empowering presentations which will take place for the rest of the day. And then this evening we have a social event which we invite you to join as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.